By 1944, the air war over Germany was lost. Allied bombers came in waves so vast they could blot out the sun, dismantling the Third Reich city by city. For German high command, it was an unsolvable problem. Their best fighters were too few and their runways too cratered to stop the endless streams of B-17s and Lancasters. So, in this cauldron of desperation, a call went out for a Wunderwaffe or Wunderweapon, but the answer wasn't a supertank or an advanced jet. It was something from science fiction, a vertical launch rocket made of wood and flown by a pilot on what was essentially a one-way mission. This is the story of the Back-in-Buth 349. NATO Germany's secret suicide rocket. Imagine living in Germany in 1944. Night after night, sirens wail as thousands of engines carry tons of explosives to your doorstep. This was the terrifying reality. Conventional fighters couldn't be built fast enough, so they needed something cheap, simple, and brutally effective. A weapon that could be built in a woodshed, flown by a barely trained pilot, and launched from anywhere. The answer was the Bakim Natter, part aircraft, part guided missile. It was a weapon born from the terror of a nation on its knees, a symbol of fanatical, last-ditch ingenuity. The mind behind this machine was Erich Bakim. In August 1944, he proposed a radical defense to the Luftwaffe's emergency fighter program. While others suggested advanced jets, Bakim's idea was completely out of left field. He envisioned a point defense interceptor that wouldn't hunt bombers, but launch vertically like a rocket straight into their path. He called it the Natter, German for Viper. It was a semi-disposable, manned rocket made of plywood, assembled by unskilled workers. The pilot needed minimal training, as an autopilot handled the brutal launch. The Luftwaffe initially rejected the concept as too dangerous, but Bakim found a sinister sponsor, Heinrich Himmler, head of the SS. Himmler loved the idea, and with his backing, the project was resurrected with top priority. Suddenly, this strange, almost suicidal concept was on the fast track to reality. The Back-in-Buth 349 Natter was a marvel of brutal simplicity, more and projectile than an airplane. The fuselage was plywood, glued and nailed together, with short wooden stubs for wings. It lacked complex controls or landing gear. The philosophy was simple, a weapon for mass production in scattered workshops, safe from Allied bombs. Propulsion was terrifying. The main engine was a Walter Huck 109509 rocket motor, running on a hypergolic fuel mix that ignited on contact. For vertical launch, four solid fuel booster rockets were strapped to the back. They would fire for about 10 seconds, hurling the nearly 500-pound machine skyward before falling away. The mission was direct and deadly. The Natter would shoot straight up, guided by autopilot. At bomber altitude, the pilot took over, aimed, and unleashed a salvo of rockets from its nose. Now about the suicide mission label. Officially, the Natter was not a suicide weapon. Bakim designed a recovery system. After attacking, the pilot would trigger explosive bolts to break the plane apart. The pilot would be ejected to parachute to safety, while the rear section with the valuable engine would also land under its own parachute. However, the system was complex and barely tested. The chances of a pilot surviving were incredibly slim. While not explicitly suicidal, the design treated the pilot's life as a secondary concern. By early 1945, pressure from Berlin was immense. Despite some success in unmanned tests, Erich Bakim's arguments for more time were ignored. A manned flight was ordered. The pilot chosen was 22-year-old Lothar Sieber, an experienced pilot who reportedly saw the dangerous flight as a chance to restore his honor after a demotion. On March 1, 1945, Sieber climbed into the cockpit. At 11:00 a.m., the Natter shot vertically up its launch tower. For a few seconds, the flight was perfect. Then, at around 500 feet, the cockpit canopy ripped away. A fatal design flaw was exposed. The pilot's headrest was attached to the canopy. When it tore off, it snapped Sieber's head back, likely breaking his neck or knocking him unconscious. Now just a missile with an incapacitated pilot, the Natter climbed erratically into the clouds. The whole flight lasted just 32 seconds. The wreckage and Sieber's remains were found kilometers away. Analysis suggested an unsecured canopy latch. Decades later, discovery of a booster rocket at the crash site suggested it also failed to jettison, contributing to the loss of control. In a tragic footnote, Lothar Sieber became the first person to launch vertically under pure rocket power. 16 years before Yuri Gagarin, he paid for that distinction with his life. Lothar Sieber's death was effectively the end of the Natter project. Though around 36 Natters were built and a small unit was deployed, they never saw combat and were destroyed as Allied forces advanced. The story didn't end there, however. American forces captured several surviving airframes under Operation Lusty, a mission to seize German secret technology. These were shipped to the US for study, and one is now in the Smithsonian's collection. So was the Natter a brilliant concept or a misguided folly? In many ways it was both. It was a forerunner to modern surface-to-air missiles, but also a weapon of utter desperation. This precarious machine of wood and glue, rushed into service, stands as a symbol of the Third Reich's final days, a regime willing to send men up in half-tested rockets to stave off inevitable defeat. It was a wonder weapon that thankfully never got the chance to prove if it was a wonder or a blunder.